This is a big issue in South America. White people who are just showing up in Brazil or Peru and like going into the jungle and like asking around for a shaman. 8 times out of 10, they're encountering a brujo whose intention is to steal their energy, their life force, and their money.
Welcome back to Dropping the Pin. I am Uncle Chaps. I'm joined by the host of the show, Donnie Does. Our first episode was on Syria. I feel like we crushed it.
Pretty good for our first one.
Yeah, I was very happy with how that one turned out. And now we're going to do something completely different. We told you last time whenever we were starting out the show that we were going to drop a pin all over the world and that we were going to do it in a wide variety of ways. And I think episode 2 is going to show you that it's not just going to be a one type of show where you talk about getting captured in Syria, basically a sad episode or a scary episode. This episode is going to be wildly different because we're going to be talking about some of your experiences that are really fresh of you on your trip to Mexico.
Yes, Oaxaca to be exact. And yeah, I had no personal experience in Syria. You didn't either. But yeah, now we'll be, I mean, I was just in Oaxaca like a week ago.
But that's not your first foray into old Mexico.
Yeah, no, I think in this episode we can talk about Mexico in general and then take a little bit more of a deep dive into Oaxaca because I knew nothing about it before I traveled there, and it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, the only thing I really know about, I mean, I guess there's a bunch of stuff that I know about Mexico, but my real connection is I lived in San Antonio for 10 years, which San Antonio by and large is Little Mexico, for lack of a better word, really. Like everything there, the culture is heavily influenced by Mexico. And it really, living there for so long, gave me a real appreciation for the people and the culture and the customs and all that kind of stuff.
And there's tons of Mexicans in Chicago too, which I had no idea before I moved here.
I was actually really pumped. So when we first moved up here, we went to a restaurant, one of the first or second nights that we were here, and it was just like a Mexican spot. And I got some chicken. And it came out with just like yellow rice, and it was chicken that was supposed to be Mexican chicken, and it had like Uncle Billy Ray's barbecue sauce, Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce on it. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to last without good quality Mexican food. Yeah. But then I found out that you go outside the area that I live in, Chicago, and there is plenty of great Mexican food.
It's a Mexican food mecca.
Yeah.
Pilsen. I think Chicago has one of the largest populations of Mexicans outside of Mexico, which I was like, would assumed it was, someplace in Texas, Los Angeles, like those places have a ton, but Chicago is right up there.
Yeah.
And I learned that when it was Mexican Independence Day last year, and it was gridlock traffic everywhere in the city. Everyone's driving around waving Mexican flags. And then I just learned
and huge ones, and they're like the hoods of their cars have it on it. Everywhere.
Yeah, honking their horns. And then I actually went to La Valida, it means little village, and that's like the little Mexico of Chicago. And like there, I think I was the only gringo.
Yeah,
yeah. And there was a huge parade.
What neighborhood is that in?
La Valida. It's west. That's all I know.
Okay.
Yeah. But it was very cool. I think it was so Mexican that one guy thought I was an undercover cop. He was like, why the fuck are you here?
Yeah. So was this trip to Mexico it's not your first time, obviously.
No, it's not. That was my third trip to Mexico in the last 3 years. My first was we were filming Rediscovering America in San Diego. And Nick Terraney had never left the country before and had just gotten a passport. So I was like, it would be my honor to take you out of the country for your first time. So we just did a day trip to Tijuana. I think he was nervous. Tijuana does not get a great rep.
It doesn't.
But
Tijuana lives off the reputation, I think, kind of like New York City did in the 1980s, where in the 80s and 90s, it was some really bad shit. And there is occasionally now, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be.
Yeah, I think the key to Tijuana is if you go there and you're not looking for prostitutes or hard drugs like cocaine.
Steroids if you're a Marine.
Yeah, or steroids, you'll be okay. Once you start looking for ladies of the night and cocaine, that's how you might get mixed up with the cartel. You might meet some unsavory characters that try to rob you. But if you're just going down to have a nice day, sip some margaritas, eat a Caesar salad. Caesar salads were invented in Tijuana.
What?
Yeah. It was this Italian chef who moved there during Prohibition because you could no longer drink in the U.S. And he invented the Caesar salad at his restaurant there. So, I mean, I got a Caesar salad while I was down there. I think at the restaurant it was invented. Top notch.
I would have never guessed Caesar salad, Mexico, ever.
No, it doesn't seem Mexican at all, really.
So when you went to Tijuana, was it uneventful?
Yeah, it was pretty uneventful. You see some shit you wouldn't see in the US. Like there was this mule that they had painted like a zebra, and then you could like take a photo sitting on a zebra.
That's the good shit.
A few days later, I was just with some friends in San Diego, and they're like, hey, my buddy's having his bachelor party down in Mexico, which was like an hour past Tijuana. And they just rented a van and drove from San Diego down to Mexico, had this beautiful villa on the coast. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go down with you. They were going to be there for the whole weekend. I was like, I need to come back on Saturday though. So we party that night. On Saturday, they all go to play golf down there. And I just grab a taxi back to the border, which was pretty cool. It's my first time just taking a taxi to a different country.
I've never done that. How does that work? Like when they get there, do they just drop you off?
Yes, the taxi was not able to drive through the border, but I got like an hour and a half taxi. He just drops me off at the border. I did not realize that the line was going to be horrific. It looked like it was going to be a 7-hour line. So I get in, I'm like, oh shit, I'm fucked. But then a guy walks up to me and he was like, $20, you can cut the whole line. I'll get you back into the US. And I was like, hey, maybe
you
this
just
guy...
have to climb this wall right here.
You just have to climb this wall.
That's all you got to do.
And I was like, hey, maybe he'll just like steal my money, but like this is a risk I'm willing to take if I can cut this 7-hour line. And he just walks me to the front and he goes, all right, get in line here. And I think that guy had no authority to just be like,
yeah, but I mean, if you act confident in a situation like that, and if somebody else is pointing you there, like that's something that you should do with buddies. Like if we go on a trip together and there's a long custom line, I'll just grab you and you'd be like, you get in here. We're going to get in here. And nobody's going to say anything if you're confident.
It was mainly Mexican people in line. And I think like they were like, okay, I'm not going to mess with this guy, whoever he was. And he just pointed me in and said, you go here. And I think it was just an unspoken rule. So yeah, I cruised right through.
Nice.
And yeah, I didn't feel unsafe in Tijuana. You can find some really seedy stuff down there if you look. Like my friend did confirm they actually do have donkey shows there.
1,000% they have donkey shows. I know several people that have gone to donkey shows. I think like being in the Marines for so long and being buddies with dudes that were in San Diego that are stationed at Camp Pendleton or Miramar, they would go down there all the time. And the military does this thing where they'll have like off limit spots where they tell you that where you can't go. For example, one of them we'll talk about in another episode is the banana lady in Okinawa, where she will put a banana in her vagina and a Marine will lay underneath her while her legs are spread and she's butt ass naked and tell how many pieces of banana to make.
Okay.
And so one of the things that you're not supposed to do in Okinawa is go to the banana show. It's off limits. Tijuana, for the longest time, was off limits. That didn't mean people didn't do it, but there was a ton of stories that had to deal with donkey shows.
Yeah, and to me, I think I wouldn't enjoy watching a donkey show. I mean, it seems dangerous for the woman.
Yeah, for those that gives you a good hint. For those that are listening that might not have ever seen a donkey show
or heard of one.
Yeah, heard of one. What is it?
A donkey has intercourse with a woman.
Yep. Make love, would you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But can you also get a donkey show where just like a guy has sex with a donkey?
I don't think that's as good of a show.
No. You want to see
either one, I guess, is not a great show.
Yeah.
But I definitely don't want to see the dude fuck a donkey.
Yeah, I feel like that's so much more degrading than like in Thailand, they have ping pong shows where girls are just like shooting ping pongs out of their vaginas. Like to be violated by a donkey seems like way worse. Hopefully those girls get paid enough. I don't think they do. I think they probably have a
pimp. I don't know what that number looks like.
No, they probably the money is going to whoever fucking organizes the donkey show.
Yeah, I don't think that's not. They need to have a little bit of like socialism, communism, where the workers are in charge. Like the workers own it.
But I think almost as the further you get away from the U.S. border, the safer Mexico becomes, the less seedy it becomes, just because there's obviously so many drugs going back and across the border. There's human trafficking back and forth across the border. But the further you get away from that, it becomes a beautiful, pleasant country. Like I've never had any super negative experiences there. We'll talk about my experiences later, but my first time actually deep in Mexico was last May. I don't know if you remember, but I had to wrestle a guy on a plane.
Yeah.
So that was on an American Airlines flight. A guy tried to open the plane door. Me and 3 other guys had to like wrestle him into the aisle and hog tie him. And then afterwards, after we subdue him, one of the flight attendants like takes down my name and number. She's like, "Don't worry, this is only for good reasons."
Wait, let's not skip through that in case there's people that haven't heard.
Okay.
Let's do that whole, because that's a you deserved a free trip to Mexico for that one.
Yes, but so after that happens, yeah, it was obviously a scary experience. Turns out the guy who was trying to open the plane door was like maybe in some sort of cult. I found the police cam footage of them talking to him afterwards, and they're like, "Why'd you do it?" And he was like, "Well, I was going to Toronto to meet this lady Lil, and I had to like prove my faith." He was like, "Lillian is the mother of everything." And they were like, "So Lillian's God?" And he was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "And I am the father of everything. And to prove my loyalty to Lillian, I had to open the plane door."
Do you think he was being for real, or was he trying to get off on insanity? I mean, you should get off on insanity if you're trying to open a plane door.
Yeah, I don't know about get off,
but that's a viable defense. You clearly are not right.
Yeah, but he should remain on a no-fly list.
Yeah. Not like get off, like, all right, go to Denny's type of thing.
Yeah. So it was just a weird experience. And I assume that American Airlines would at least hook it up with a flight credit or something like that.
Yeah.
For taking charge. They did jack shit. But I had a tweet that went viral, and it was like, I had just like finished a tequila soda and a platter of Panda Express and was like drifting asleep. I think the words I used, I was like falling asleep in a tequila and Panda Express induced stupor when I was awoken by the guy opening the plane door, and I jumped into action.
I've never been more jealous of somebody.
Yeah.
I want that moment so bad, like your Mark Wahlberg type of moment. I call it wish a motherfucker would moment, like when you're in a place and you know you're going to get a lot of attention for doing something heroic. That's like the dream, and you lived it.
I know. And I got off pretty easy too, because the guy didn't really fight back too much. I pretty much just had to sit on him in the aisle.
Yeah.
He was a big dude. And at first he was freaking out, like when he had his hands on the plane door. As soon as we got his hands off the plane door, he kind of went limp. And then it was just a matter of like moving his big ass body around and getting the like flexicuffs on him and duct tape around his feet. But yeah, you're right. And I had probably fantasized about that exact same moment. So like when I woke up, saw it was happening, I was just like, okay, it's go time. I wanted this to happen. I can't like freak out now and be a pussy. But long story short,
timelines, yeah.
American Airlines never did shit. I never got a flight credit or anything. But because I had that tweet where I mentioned tequila, Jose Cuervo reached out. And they were like, "We saw your tweet to thank you for your efforts. We're like leading a bunch of influencers down to Tequila, Mexico for Cinco de Mayo, and we would like you to join the trip." And I was like, all right, sweet. Now it was all worth it. So there is a town in Mexico called Tequila, and it's where tequila was invented by the Jose Cuervo family. Jose Cuervo was the first company to ever sell tequila commercially. So I don't know if Jose Cuervo invented the drink, but he was the first one to be like, this shit's so good.
Mass produce it.
Yeah, we need to start selling this stuff all over the world. And so that family kind of just like owns this whole town. And so we fly down to Guadalajara. And the funny thing is that it's like me, we had like a barstool guy. The rest of the people on the trip were like reality TV stars from F-Boy Island. Like all
really?
yes, all this shit. And I
Love is Blind, or
they may have had some people from Love is Blind.
God, I want to see that list. I need to know who's on that list because I'm a huge trash TV. Do you know that about me? It's one of my. I watch things that I am like dedicated. I'm going to watch if they're on. The Jacksonville Jaguars, #1 with a bullet. I'm always going to watch them. #2, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City.
Okay.
Really high up there. Love Island and Love is Blind. And 1,000 Pound Sisters. Those are ones I'm always going to watch.
Okay. Now my wife is obsessed with 90 Day Fiance. Do you ever watch that?
I've watched that before too. Yeah.
Okay. Because that is an angle. We might be able to get some 90 Day Fiance stars on this show.
Oh,
it fits with the travel theme.
Yeah, we should.
My wife watches it too much. So like I'm not a huge fan, but talking to some of the folks on that show would be very interesting.
Yeah. How they come about and the spouses, like the ones that come over. I feel so bad for the dudes who it'll be like, there's one episode or series where it's this Ukrainian woman and she's very attractive and she's with this thumb looking dude.
Oh yeah.
And every time he's like, do you want to like be intimate? And she'll be like, no, you're weird. Like just straight up using this dude to get an American citizenship.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah. This is the real shit. This is how it really goes down.
But you see men doing the same thing, like these dudes in Africa, and they're dating, no offense, but like some of the grossest chicks I've ever seen. These
big old fats. Yeah.
Yeah. Big old fats, just horribly unhealthy, chain smoking. And
it'll be some hot dude from like Egypt or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just trying to get over here.
And sometimes the woman will be saying the same thing. They're like, he never wants to have sex with me. Like, it's getting really annoying.
I love it when the guys will be like, well, it's kind of against our culture. It has nothing to do with the fact that she's 400 pounds. It has nothing to do with that.
Well, hey, if you're watching this and if you met your wife, like online via one of those, because they have all these websites. It's like, do you want a Filipino wife? Do you want a Ukrainian wife? And you can go online and find one. So, and sometimes it works out. Sometimes it leads to a loving long-term relationship. So if that's how you met your significant other, reach out and we'll have you on the pod. So yes, shout out Jose Cuervo. They flew me down. My wife came down too. She was a little uncomfortable when she realized it was like all reality TV stars. But I mean, I was having a blast. They have this thing called the Jose Cuervo Express, and it's a train that goes from Guadalajara to the town of Tequila, Mexico, and it's like a party train. Each train car has a bar. Because we were going to this music festival in Tequila, each train car also had a DJ performing. And then in the VIP train car, which I finagled my way into, Disclosure was doing a set. Okay. I don't know if you know who. I guess Disclosure's like one of the biggest EDM artists.
Is he?
Yeah,
I know who it is.
He's got that one hit song, which is like one of the biggest songs. And like at first, I was just like, "Oh, this is cool."
You know, he's good because he takes off the E before Disclosure at the end.
Yeah,
it's just the R. What a badass!
And all drinks, like everything's free the whole time. And I was like, "Oh, I've heard this song before," and they were like, yeah, well, it's like the guy who made the song who's performing it right now. So you're just on this train going through agave fields, and you got unlimited tequila and incredible DJs. They also had people coming around serving tacos. I think it was the best train ride of my life.
Has to be. Was it a nice train or was it shitty?
It was a nice train.
Nice.
Yeah. So the Jose Cuervo Express, I don't know if they only like run it for special events. But that was the highlight of the trip for me. And then we arrived in the town of Tequila. We're staying in a hotel that's like owned by the Jose Cuervo family. And when you get to like those parts of Mexico, it feels completely different than like Cancun or Tijuana. Mm-hmm. It feels very colonial, like almost like Spain.
Okay.
I felt like I was in a small town in Spain. And there's like a beautiful volcano in the background. So I was just really impressed with Mexico there. And I drank so much tequila that whole trip, never really had a hangover. I think it's just because it's like a pure, like I guess they say that about the wine in Italy. Like they say like that there's no nitrates. It's made so purely that the hangovers aren't bad. And that's what I experienced. I did have one moment. We went to a music festival that night, and I guess my wife told me she was going to the bathroom, but I didn't hear her. Maybe because I had taken a small dose of shrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden I look around, I can't find her for like 15 minutes. And I started to panic. I had that moment where it's like,
oh yeah,
she's been taken.
Yeah.
And like, I lost my shit. And then when I finally found her, I was like, never do that again. Like how, like I was so scared. That led to like a big fight just because I was having a panic attack. But that was just the gringo in me. Like we hear so many bad stories of Mexico that you can't find someone for 15 minutes and your brain like immediately goes to the darkest place it can.
Yeah, I think that you're exactly right. And media portrays that like what your expectation is. Like my mom, the first time she came to Chicago, like she's a Fox News lady.
Ooh, yep.
So all she watches is that kind of stuff. And so when I see her in the back seat like of my car, my wife's sitting in the passenger seat and my mom's in the back, like going through when we're riding down Division, like a totally fine spot to be riding down like near where I live at. And she looks so nervous and she's like, oh, are we in a bad part of town? Are we in a bad part of town? I'm like, Mom, we just went by one of the most famous beef spots that there are in Chicago. Like, no, we're not in a bad spot. But your mind tricks you into thinking that everything that you read about is true and that it's going to be constantly bad wherever I am.
I've found Chicago very safe. There are obviously neighborhoods you don't want to go to, but my mindset is pretty much a place is safe until something bad happens to me. So maybe I'll eventually get mugged in Chicago and then like I'll start being more cautious. But right now I treat it like the safest city in the world. And nothing bad happened to us in Mexico. I think for a while, the cartels were actually getting close to like the tourism areas.
I think that was probably about 10 years ago where there was like about a month, 2 months long. There were some big cartel wars that were going on and they were making examples out of like tourists and different police officials. Like there was one large, I think it was a 4 or 5 star hotel, one of the all inclusives that you don't have to leave if you don't want to. They took some of the tourists and they legit had their heads on spikes, like in front of the big resorts.
Holy fuck.
But Mexico, like most other spots where if you know that tourism is getting fucked with or high level of your money, if you're messing with somebody's money, they're going to come in and try to clean that up. So they did that pretty quick. Like they came in and they were like, nah, this isn't going to be good. And you see that here too. Like you see that in bad spots, no matter where you are, like where if the tourists are coming to this area, it's going to be a lot more strict enforcement.
Where I was this most recent trip, Oaxaca apparently has like close to zero cartel presence.
Okay.
And it's also a part of Mexico with like the largest percentage of indigenous people.
Okay.
And someone I talked to was like, yeah, the indigenous people like won't put up with the cartels. Like if they try to come, they'll be killed. So it's known as one of the safest parts of Mexico. It's also known as it has like some of the best cuisine in all of Mexico. I was solo for a lot of it, just wandering the streets, felt safe the entire time. I've heard the same with Mexico City. Like that's become a huge hotspot for Americans to move to. My friend just was like working remote from Mexico City for 9 months. Jackie Nix or Jack, what's her name?
Nichols?
Jackie Nichols.
Yeah.
She just went down there as a solo female traveling around Mexico City. She felt safe the whole time.
Nice.
And that like Mexico City is the largest city in North America.
That's something we should do on shows. Give it like a hot spot. Like how hot is it? How safe is it? Should you go alone? Go with a group? What size group should you go with?
Mexico City, I'm just going to say, it's safe. I think it's becoming like there's too many gringos going down where the local Mexicans are starting to get upset.
Yeah.
There was an article in like the Los Angeles Times and they're like, Mexicans upset because they go into a restaurant and like the menus will only be in English. And they're like, I thought this was Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I know people complain about that in the US. Like, if you go to a store and no one speaks English, you're like, what the fuck? I thought this was America.
Right.
Like, that's becoming a problem because like parts of Mexico City are becoming so gentrified.
And then I'm like, oh, I like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is nice.
I've never been. That will definitely be the next place I go to in Mexico.
We need to figure out a trip for you and I to do.
When was your last time leaving the country?
Oh, it's been a bit.
Yeah.
Shit, it's been a long time. Probably I haven't left since the Bahamas in like 20 or 13, 14.
Oh, shit.
A
Yeah.
long time.
We got to get you out there. Mexico's a good place to travel to from Chicago because there's so many Mexicans here. They have actually very cheap, like reasonable flights to Mexico City.
Okay.
When I went down to Oaxaca, it was just 2 hours to Dallas and then about another 2 hours and 20 minutes to Oaxaca City.
Okay. Let's get into Oaxaca. We pulled up some information on like the historical aspect. And like you said, it is one of the most indigenous spots in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
I actually did some research before, and there's 16 different indigenous cultures that are there, all of which have their own language, their own customs, their own courtesies, their own traditions. One of the classes that I took in college at UTSA that I really loved, it was the art of death and dying is what it was called. And we spent a lot of time talking about the indigenous cultures of Mexico and very southern Texas. And some of the things that they focused on there became like what the movie Coco is, and talking about the Day of the Dead and the cultures there, and how even in this one area, there was the 16 different parts, but some of the traditions, they do intertwine. And I thought the death side of that part of Mexico is really, really interesting, and how they value their cultural members. And honestly, of all the things that I picked up culturally from living in Texas for so long, my love for the Day of the Dead and really the month-long celebration before that is at the top. Like, I think that the idea of having an ofrenda, like having pictures that are up on a mantle of dead relatives, is such a beautiful concept to have.
Yes.
You know, that you focus and you teach, like we have. So we did it with our family after. We put up like old pets, like our old cat Pepper. We put up grandparents and great grandparents and sometimes great uncles, people that I hadn't really talked to my kids about. Because how often, if they haven't met, and my great grandfather died when I was 9. So the significance to my kids is so small. But having that and putting up a picture and being able to tell your kids stories that normally you wouldn't, or something that pops up, I think is a very beautiful cultural statement. Yeah,
because like the closest thing we have to Day of the Dead, or falls around the same time, as Halloween. But that's more to think of all like the scary aspects.
Yeah.
Like,
and I'd say they're very, very different. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, we're like, oh shit, it's Halloween. Like the ghosts and goblins are going to come out. It's not like, oh, let's think about the people who have passed on and celebrate them.
Yeah. And even the idea of the dead is a totally different thought for like a Mexican heritage versus an American heritage, where dead in our culture, we think of like dead things spooky, you know, like a cemetery is spooky. Having a Day of the Dead, you automatically assume, oh, that's going to be like Halloween,
satanic or
when
something.
It's really like a spiritual family reunion is kind of how some of my Mexican friends had referred to it.
That's beautiful. Well, maybe we'll have to go down for Day of the Dead.
Yeah. And so some of these cultures that are here, like one of them in that class that we talked about in the Day of the Dead, they actually, if you die, there's one culture where if you die in the month of October, they will not bury you until October is over. So then you could stay with all the other souls of your family members that are already there. So they do everything they can to preserve. And they will even...
Your body starts to decompose pretty fast.
It does. They had these glass coffins that are made that are sealed, that they put inside people's living rooms. And so like family members, if they die during the month of October, are just basically hanging out in a big fucking fish tank. Like in the middle of your living room.
That might be kind of tough.
While they're watching their Cowboys play.
Yeah. I'm all for putting up photos and stuff. I don't know if I want them. Like,
You're not going to do that
like
type of
3 weeks old.
You're not doing that type of cultural appropriation.
Probably not. Should we talk about like why I went down to Oaxaca?
Yeah, let's do it.
I've been trying to do some trips this fall because I got a baby coming in February. Once he arrives, I won't be traveling that often. So I was like, all right, what's like a quick trip I could do? Obviously, Central America. It's pretty easy to get to relatively from Chicago. I was thinking of maybe going to Guatemala. I've heard good things about that. There's like a Lake Atitlan. It's a beautiful like volcanic lake with all these cool towns around it. But then an acquaintance I have on Instagram, I had never met him, but we've like DM'd back and forth, and he does a lot of psychedelic plant medicine content. And he was leading a retreat down to a small village in Oaxaca to do a mushroom ceremony. And then I was reading about the village and I was like, oh, I've heard of this place. Because I read a book called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. It was kind of about the history of shrooms, LSD, ayahuasca, all of these kind of mind-altering medicines. And I was fascinated by the story when I read it, that the way that shrooms got introduced to the Western world was there was this VP of JP Morgan, who in his spare time also happened to be a mushroom scientist, mushroom enthusiast. And this was back in the 1950s. And he heard about this tribe in Mexico. It was a Mazatec tribe that used shrooms in their religious rituals. And he was like, oh, I would love to see this firsthand. So he traveled down and eventually convinced the shaman there, a lady by the name of María Sabina, to let him participate in this mushroom ritual. So that was his first time trying psilocybin, magic mushrooms. He went back to the US, wrote this article called like In Search of the Magic Mushroom for Life magazine, which then went viral. And everyone was like, oh, wow, like I want to try these shrooms. That led to a bunch of hippies traveling to this same village in Oaxaca called Huautla de Jimenez. And then like that's kind of how the Western world even discovered magic mushrooms in the first place, even though there was like a lot of tribes in Mexico that have been using shrooms for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I guess like the Beatles ended up going down there, Bob Dylan, Keith Richards, like
basically everybody you'd expect.
Yeah, everybody you'd expect.
Harrison was in it. James Harrison was like, yeah.
But like
George Harrison.
So many people went down, it started to become a problem. Like the hippies were like they set up camp near a river. And people got pissed at María Sabina because they were like, why did you tell the gringos about this?
Right.
Like, now we've got like, and I think the police raided her home because then they were like, oh, this lady's a drug dealer. The local villagers, I think, burned down her house and maybe killed her son. Like she became the villain of sorts.
Yeah.
Because they're like, it's because of you. We got all these dirty ass hippies just hanging around town constantly. So it kind of took a dark turn for a while. But at some point, I think eventually they just like banned all Westerners from that town. And then over time, they kind of started to embrace that background. And they started to like consider María Sabina as a hero. Like she's the high priestess of mushrooms. Now, if you go to that town, there's mushrooms on the cabs. There's like a giant mushroom sculpture as you're driving into town. All these streets and businesses are named after María Sabina. So I found out that this dude on Instagram, he was leading a mushroom retreat to that same town. And he was going to be doing a mushroom ritual with María Sabina's great grandson, who is now a shaman. So I was like, this is an experience I shouldn't pass up on. And that's where I went.
So let's walk through it. Let's talk about it.
Okay. Where should we start?
Can I tell you what I would have thought?
Yeah.
So have you ever watched, there's a show that it stars Nicole Kidman. It's on HBO, or maybe it was on Hulu, where she runs this retreat that's for rich people that are in Hawaii. And they do a lot of microdosing there. And like they just take you on these trips. They talk you through like where you're really crying and weeping about your childhood, where doors opened up, where you're letting all kinds of trauma and emotions out in a way. You're doing a lot of hugging. It's a very emotional thing. If I was going to be walking through with somebody like you, I would guarantee that I would be picturing myself back in Iraq, that I would be talking about my dad who was an alcoholic, talking about a friend who died in a car wreck, that you're just going through crazy shit that happened to you and you're doing it while sweating. And then when you break through the other side, it's like an orgasm of happiness. That would be my expectation.
Yes. And I think that's like why so there was a group of maybe 7 Americans that were also on this trip. And I think that like for reasons similar to that, that's why they came down. Like they were going down to be healed or to work through some like serious personal problems they've had.
Have a case of the weepies.
And so when I showed up, I felt a little out of place because I was like, I'm just here because I'm fascinated by the history of shrooms.
I've never done shrooms.
You should try them at some point.
You could walk me through. You could be my shaman.
The ceremonies were done solo, so we didn't do it as a group ceremony. Each night, a different person would have his mushroom ceremony. And like the first 2 people who went had like very intense reactions. Like one guy was like, I think I had an exorcism. My experience ended up not being crazy intense. I feel like I've had way stronger trips here, but I can walk you through how the whole night went.
Yeah, I'd love that.
So we're staying in this hotel in town, but then we drive up to Bernardino's house, and he's the shaman. He's got this separate little like shack, and that's where he does his healings. And you go inside and there's pictures and murals of Maria Sabina everywhere. There's like shroom murals, candles.
Like shrines almost?
Yeah. It's kind of like a shrine to Maria Sabina. And then there's a mattress on the ground. You sit down on the mattress, you wait for Bernardino to come in. When he walks in, he starts to burn, I think like salvia, like some sort of plant, waves it around. And then he hands you a cup filled with shrooms. So the shrooms have been cooked into like a tea. Apparently I took 8 grams, which is more than I have ever taken at one time here in the US. And they were fresh shrooms. They weren't the dried variety. And then you slowly just like sip and eat all the shrooms. And then you kind of just lie back down, and Bernardino's completely silent. He's kind of like waiting for the medicine to take effect. After about 45 minutes, he starts to do all these chants, and he's chanting in the Mazatec language. He starts to pace back and forth in the room. He's got these like leaves and these plants that he's like waving around. At some points, he'll like walk up to you and kind of like wrap your head in those plants and be chanting directly at you.
Like directly in your face?
Yeah.
Was that eerie or?
Well, at one point, he brings over a cup of water, and I was like, oh, they're having me drink water. But then he takes a sip and spits the water directly into my face. I didn't see that coming. I did not see that coming. One thing he says over and over again is San Pedro, San Palo, San Pedro, San Palo, San Pedro, San Palo. And this goes on for maybe 2 hours. It was a very intense experience, but the moment the ceremony ends and he goes to leave the shack, he opens his door and he has this tiny puppy that like runs in and jumps on my face. So that really lightened the mood.
Dude, yeah.
I started cracking up, and that was, I loved seeing that puppy. And the puppy ended up just like hanging out with me and sleeping in my bed for a while.
Dude, that's awesome.
I filmed it. It's like very dark, so I don't know how well you can see it, but you'll be able to hear the whole thing. You'll be able to hear him spitting on my face. Well, he was squirting water on my face. It wasn't spit.
That's spit. Yeah, that's spit.
I filmed an interview with him the next day. I had a list of all of the questions I was going to ask, and I translated them. But then I had no idea what his answers were. I still have to get his answers translated.
Okay.
So one of the questions is, what was the purpose of spitting the water on my face? And so we'll have to get that translated so we can figure out why. But I think it was kind of like some sort of cleanse. While it was going on, I had trouble just like completely clearing my mind and focusing on the present.
You think some of that because you're doing content?
Yeah.
Like worrying about making that entertaining too, or like I can't believe I got him spitting on my face.
It was weird because I think like most people like never film this, but I just offered to pay him like a pretty solid amount more. And then he was like, yeah, you can film it. Every morning before someone would do their ritual, Jaret, the guy organizing the retreat, was like, okay, we have to go to this waterfall and you have to do a plant bath and you're going to do some rape, which is Amazonian snorting tobacco. That's like, I posted a video of that guy blowing tobacco up my nose. And like, it was probably the most hippy dippy stuff I have ever filmed.
Oh, really?
So yeah, I was definitely out of my element, but you know, I'm with a group of people. They're all taking it very seriously. So I got into that mindset as well. Even though knowing I was like, if anyone else from Barstool was on this trip, they'd be like, what the fuck is going on? like, I'm not going to do this plant bath. Like,
I want to do the plant path.
Yeah. So a plant bath is we would make a fire next to the waterfall and then you would put flowers in it. And then, so you heat up the water until it's like almost boiling. You put in the flowers and you boil the flowers down. And if you put in blue flowers, it just turns the water blue. And then you sit down and like people had like little cucaracas or whatever.
Yeah,
Cucarac. No.
Maracas. Yeah.
Maracas. They're like shaking that. There's like a drum and everyone's just like drumming and shaking it while like Jaret like pours the water all over
that
you.
is like that show with Nicole Kidman.
It was the same. It was a lot
vibe.
like that. Yes. Yeah. It was a lot like this. Pours it on you and then he takes out rape and blows it up your nose.
What's rape?
It's Amazonian tobacco that you snort instead of
like snuff.
Yeah, it's like snuff, but it was stronger than snuff. Like he blew it up like a large amount up each of my nostrils and the back.
So this guy's spitting in your face and blowing shit up your nostrils.
Well, it was not. It was Jaret who was blowing it up my nostril.
Different fella.
Bernardino was spitting in my face. And yeah, he blew that up my nostril. It like, oh my God, like the back of my head just like was frozen. Like my whole face was kind of frozen. But afterwards I did feel great. It felt very like it kind of like centered me. It grounded me. It cleared my thoughts.
Yeah, that part I would love because I'm a huge bath guy. If you give me bath and wildflowers, buddy, I'm in.
You'll have to wait to see the footage from the ceremony and my interview with the shaman Bernardino. But now let's chat with the shaman's apprentice, Jaret, the one who organized the entire retreat. What did you tell me when we were down there? You thought Mexico was the most magical country on earth?
It's not necessarily even about the country. It's about the land itself, like the geography of where it's located in the world and the cultural preservation that has remained in Mexico. Like, for example, where I do my ayahuasca retreats, where we host those with my shaman Arturo in the Yucatan. So that's Maya country. And for anybody listening, like the Yucatan, that's like Cancun and everything. And Cancun is literally like a 45-year-old city that was created once America lost its relationship with Cuba. And so Americans weren't vacationing in Cuba anymore. So they were like, all right, well, let's build a place for the white people to come. But other than that, the peninsula, and the peninsula includes Belize, like it extends far beyond even Mexico. It is riddled with Maya culture and with hundreds of pyramids, thousands of structures. And the Maya were never fully conquered. They were never fully conquered by the Spanish, which is why they're the strongest ethnic group still intact in Mexico. Like where we hang out, like Arturo's friends, a lot of them don't speak one word of Spanish. Like they only speak Mayan. It's like it's very intact. And like where we were done, like the Mazatec people in Huautla, I mean, that's another amazing place to go. I mean, because you get to, obviously they're not living as tribally as they once were, but like, we're hanging out with Bernardino, who grew up in a house that is speaking Mazatec, and the ceremonies are held in Mazatec, and they're still using the same sacred medicines. And, it's very cool. It's very special, and we're very privileged and lucky to be able to even go there as like white dudes,
Yeah.
for them to even allow us in. And that's why, throughout the whole week, I kept stressing. I was like, man, I like to like tiptoe through these places. When I first started traveling, I was loud, American, probably just terrible, probably just from, and I've started to like try to put myself in the perspective of these people. Right. And it's like, I just don't ever want to like come into these places acting like a fucking jack off.
So you're like a plant medicine enthusiast. You have a YouTube page where you have really traveled all over the world doing all sorts of psychedelics. You've built connections down in Mexico with two shamans. One that is uses mushrooms in his ceremonies, and then there's Arturo, who uses ayahuasca in his ceremonies.
Well, Arturo's actually a mushroom guy.
Oh, okay.
But he has an amazing ayahuasca teacher that he's worked with for many years, and that guy taught him how to make this particular brew that we're calling yucahuasca, because it's being made in the Yucatan, and it contains normally when you're having ayahuasca, normally a brew contains like 2 or 3 ingredients, one of which being the ayahuasca vine, which allows the DMT containing plants to become orally active, because we have an enzyme in our gut called a monoaminoxidase inhibitor. And so most plants in nature, including our own brains, contain DMT. But if you were to just go eat a plant, even if it's super rich in DMT, if you were to just eat it, nothing would happen to you, because that enzyme in our gut breaks it down. So that's really the magic of ayahuasca, is that it contains this vine called Banisteriopsis caapi. That's its scientific name, but it's the ayahuasca vine. And so normally in the brew, right, you have like your DMT containing plant, your ayahuasca vine, and, depending on where you're at in South America, they might add like a couple other plants. But this brew has like 13 plants in it. And it includes a bunch of plants that were used by the Maya shamans for ceremonial and healing purposes. Arturo's a botanist, and he's very well versed in the plants in the region and the Maya culture and how these things were used. So this brew is very special. And when he made it for me, because I went to see him one time, and the plan was to maybe like have a mushroom ceremony with him. And he was like, I don't have any mushrooms at the time, at the moment, but I have this awesome ayahuasca I can make for you. And I was like, all right. And so that's where all of this was born, where we were like, listen, Arturo, like, this is very special. Let's create something around this. And it was like perfect timing for him, perfect timing for me. And so we're doing the ayahuasca retreats, because it's a very special medicine. I mean, listen, we can unpack all of them. Mushrooms and ayahuasca are.
But like, let's take it a step back. Like, how does one meet a shaman in Mexico?
Well, one, you got to show up. You know this as a vlogger. It's like, how do you eat mad honey in Nepal? Well, you got to show up, and you got to find it and buy it and eat it. Like, yep. This is the groundwork, right? But then there's another layer, and there's like this like magical layer that's like really hard to talk about, hard to unpack, but that is a huge part of it. And you could also, these medicines have their own spirit as well. And the spirits of these medicines are pulling strings behind the scenes as well. And so I feel like there's a lot that goes into it. But a big part of it is like, and like manifestation is practical. It's like whatever you move towards, you're going to create more of. Whatever you seek, you're going to find in some version or form, right? And this is what I'm super passionate about. It's what it's like been my main focus, and these people presented themselves in my lives in different ways, and I'm happy to break those down. I mean, I think this is about the mushroom, right? This podcast is kind of talking about your experience, right, in Huautla.
Yeah, guess we can focus on that.
Yeah, we can. So we can talk a bit about Bernardino. I mean, like, I'm drinking the out of the Maria Sabina mug right now, as she is. Chilling with a cigarette. Legend. She would be 130 years old right now. And
Wow.
so Bernardino, the shaman we were working with, is her great grandson. Nobody listening right now would have ever eaten a psilocybin mushroom if it weren't for this place and this woman, because she introduced a guy named Gordon Wasson to psilocybin mushrooms in the 1950s, and he was the first like Western like person in science or with any sort of influence to become aware of this. Right. And this guy was he was a banker, like a Wall Street banker by trade, but he ended up becoming like the founder essentially of mycology, like the study of mushrooms. And he put out a lot of like really interesting books and papers, like talking about the mystery at Eleusis, which
Mhm.
is fascinating. Have you heard of that, Don?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was like a ceremony they would do in ancient Greece.
Yeah, so that was on the plains outside of Greece, and dude, that went on the Eleusinian mysteries went on for 2,000 years, twice a year, and anybody who was anybody, Plato, all these people, like anybody who was anybody, came to have this experience, and we don't know what they were drinking. But I mean, Gordon Wasson, him and Albert Hoffman, the guy who discovered LSD, they put out this whole book talking about how the Eleusinian mysteries, they were drinking an ergotized beer. So LSD compounds grow in a fungus called ergot. Then it grows on barley and wheat and shit. And so they put out this whole book talking about how that's what they were consuming, was a beer contaminated with ergot. And they had a way of getting the like deadly chemical. They would like scrape the foam off the top and like leave just the LSD molecule. I mean, it's a whole thing. We're going on a tangent here. We're going on a tangent here. But yeah, so anyway, Maria Sabina introduces this dude to mushrooms. He comes back to the US. He's like, guys, this is fucking crazy. Starts writing papers on it. Then people like John Lennon and all of these, characters end up going down there, having experiences. And so anyway, she's dead. A lot of the family's dead. There's a lot of fake shamans in the town today. Just that there's a lot of fake shamans in general today, because America specifically has developed such a fascination with shamanism. And so there's all these people, indigenous and white people, now calling themselves shamans. And the way I look at it, there's like levels. There's like complete and utter fake, phony idiots, liars. And then there's like there's like space holders, Then there's facilitators. Then there's apprentices, and then there's shamans, and then there's good shamans, and then there's Bernardino. He's in a league of his own. Because mushroom shamanism, listen, there are thousands and thousands of ayahuasca shamans in the world, like in South America, like everywhere. In every tribe, there's, an ayahuasca shaman, or maybe a brujo. Maybe not a shaman. Maybe they're a brujo, which is like a witch.
That's a better name. I mean, Brujo. Come on, that's great. Yeah, well, attractive lady named a Brujo. Sign me up.
But so a Brujo, this is a big issue, and we can dive into this. This is a big issue in South America. Is these people using plants and using ayahuasca for nefarious purposes. It is a massive issue. I have had crazy conversations with like elite shamans in Peru and talking about how like brujos like killed their children and stuff. Wow. Like with spells, like crazy shit, because plants are neither light or dark. Like they're indifferent. They contain both. And you can use them for dark purposes. And this is like a massive issue. And this is what a lot of people who, like white people who are just showing up in Brazil or Peru and like going into the jungle and like asking around for a shaman, 8 times out of 10, they're encountering a brujo whose intention is to steal their energy, their life force, and their money. Like, these are vampiric characters.
Okay, so Chaps has never tried any sort of plant medicine besides weed, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think you're probably scaring him away from it.
No, I love it. If I want somebody to steal my energy.
No.
My energy fucking stinks.
No, Chaps. No,
I want to end up in a weeping ball in the corner.
No, but it's great to end up in a weeping ball in the corner, but you don't want to be fucking around with somebody who can fucking turn your lights off.
Yeah, so we were talking earlier about my experiences, and I was asking him about how he went and did it make him super emotional. And he said he didn't think he really had a whole lot to unpack at that moment, like whenever he went.
Yeah.
But I think I would. I think I would have all kinds of shit that was there.
Yeah. So Chaps was a Marine. He was shot in Iraq. He's never experimented with any sort of psychedelic. So I think for him, like doing a mushroom ceremony, I think overall would be very therapeutic. Do you have any advice for Chaps if he wanted to go down that road in the future and experiment with it?
Yeah, my advice would be like, listen, I'm somebody who's taken psychedelics like hundreds of times, right? And it's not to say that just taking mushrooms on your own and looking out at the lake here or whatever isn't valuable, but I would really recommend that you do it in ceremony with like a really legit and renowned shaman. Like that would be like an indigenous shaman. Now, there's a lot of, I don't say a lot, but there's a number of plant teachers of plant medicines, right? Like most notably, right, mushrooms, which aren't a plant, but they get grouped into that word plant medicine, but they are their own thing. They're in the fungal family. So you have mushrooms, you have ayahuasca, you have the cactuses, wachuma and peyote. So these ones contain mescaline, which is very different than the indole hallucinogens like DMT and psilocybin. It's more of an empathogen, more structurally similar to like MDMA. It's a heart opener.
That's the cactus one?
That's the cactus.
Okay.
That could be really good for you, Chaps. Like a legit like wachuma ceremony.
Okay.
Odd. I mean, that's like, and so that one has what they call the grandfather spirit. So all of these have a different thing. Like, and where we were done, the Mazatecs, they call the mushrooms Los Niños Santos, which means the holy children. So the mushrooms have like the spirit of the child, which is why you can fuck around with them, which is why you can take a gram and go to a rave and they'll play with you, right? But they're not going to take you to the depths, without a ceremonial and respectful kind of environment. Ayahuasca, the grandmother spirit, it's like the ultimate cleaning. I mean, you'll purge out of your ass, your mouth.
I don't want that.
No,
I think you have done enough purging out of your ass.
I've had diarrhea every day since Easter of 2007, my friend.
That is amazing.
So, yeah.
I guess that's amazing.
I would ease your way. I wouldn't do ayahuasca first if I were you. If I were you, I would probably go have an experience like what me and Don were doing, maybe some wachuma, and then work into ayahuasca, because that's where shit's going to get fucking... Listen, they work in different ways, man. And ayahuasca, it crawls into the crevices of your body and heart and soul and mind, and like just kicks the doors open of like anything that you've been hiding or holding on to or running from. Like, it's all going to be presented to you in that experience, right? So I think mushrooms would be a good way to ease into it. And then you have like ibogaine from Africa, which is something that a lot of people are using for like addiction and like very severe PTSD. Like, this is one that you do not fuck around with. Like, people die. Like, it can actually kill you. And when you get initiated into the Iboga cults in Africa, they give you a dose so big that the intention is for you to either not come back. And if you do come back, you're going to be on like God status.
I'm
So,
gonna
like,
pass on that one.
Yeah.
I think I'm all
Like,
set.
unless you're like in a very, very bad place, like I haven't done it. I have no reason to do it. Unless you're in like a very bad place, I don't think that one is needed. But that one is like, I mean, it's got like 100% like addiction cure rate.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest with you, Jaret. I've talked to you for 30 minutes, and if there's something that you're a little hesitant about, I'm gonna steer clear.
Yeah.
I feel like that's my so far. That's what I've
Okay.
established in the interview. If you're like,
Right.
I don't want to do that, then I'm with you. Me and you
Fair
both
enough.
not doing that one.
We had one person on our trip down to Mexico where he was a heroin addict for 10 years. And then he did an Abigail ceremony and hasn't done heroin since
Wow.
after one ceremony. So
Wow.
like he was in such a bad place that he was like, if I keep going down this road, I'm going to die anyways. So what do I have to lose?
Right.
Did Abigail, and he's been clean.
Now, what is it? Would that be effectual for like mental disorders too? Like, for instance, like bipolarism or something like personality disorder?
No.
Okay.
So
No.
these are very sacred medicines that are generally very safe. Like physically, 100% safe. But if you are already on the edge of like a schizophrenic break or something, or like a full-blown personality disorder, like drinking ayahuasca can send you over the edge to the point
Okay.
you don't come back. So like my teacher, Arturo, like we can't serve schizophrenic people, or like even if your parents are schizophrenic, like he won't serve you.
Yep.
Bipolar, same thing. And then sociopaths.
Damn.
Because people who are like legit sociopaths, they can drink medicine and like become like, they can use the power and wisdom or insight that they gain and like weaponize it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah, they do. I mean, so if even if your parents have any of those conditions, then
I have it.
You're
Not
yeah.
sociopath,
I'm
no.
like, you don't seem
But
like a
I have-
sociopath.
I have bipolar disorder.
So that one is interesting, and that's one that we can have a private conversation about.
Well, I mean, I think we could do. I'm a total open book. So I have what's called bipolar type B, where I don't experience the manic highs. I just basically hover in the lows. Is what like
Okay.
It's not constant deep seated depression, but I fluctuate from like being flat affect to being really depressed, and so that's the way that my bipolarism manifests. So I don't have like the crazy high where I'm going to go out and do all kinds of wild shit and then be in my bedroom for like a month and a half after. Like I don't experience it that way.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, like before you ever decide to like go drink medicine, let me know, and we can get on a call with Arturo and like dive into this. And
Well, if I would do it with somebody like him. Like after,
yeah, 100%. And
Yeah.
like, he's somebody that you could trust to give you guidance in this field on like what medicines you should use, what you should avoid, if you should do it, this kind of thing. And he's who you'd want to talk to. So
definitely not just like hanging out with Donnie on a Wednesday night at a concert and throwing in some couple mouthful of mushrooms.
no, absolutely not.
Should avoid that.
There's other cool things out there. Like, have you guys heard of Kana?
No.
So this is about to be like the next big thing. It's something I've been using. It is a root from Africa. When Africa is generally like very poor in like psychedelic or entheogenic plants. But this one is very cool. It's called Kana, Kanna. And it is like it's like a subtle plant-induced MDMA experience. Just makes you very in your heart, very happy. So if you wanted to do something more recreationally, there's other things, like cannabis or like Kana.
When I posted that clip of you blowing the rape up my nose, like everybody in the comments thought you were the shaman I had traveled to Mexico to see. And they were all like, why would you like go all the way to Mexico just to like do a ceremony with this white dude?
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself a shaman in training?
I would consider myself more of like a facilitator,
Okay.
right now. I'm a facilitator. I can help facilitate the medicine, but like Bernardino, bro. I mean, what that guy is a fucking true shaman. Like the way that he was, one of the guys in our group had like a really intense purge, like to where he was just expelling demons out of him for hours, puking. And so these spirits come out and then they're in the space. And it takes a very experienced and powerful shaman to be able to escort those spirits and entities out without them latching on to him or me or because there's 4 people in the ceremony. There's the patient, person purging, there's Bernardino and me, who are both like, doing the chants and the prayers and everything, kind of like working the ceremony. And then there's his wife, who's in there, like, keeping everything cool, grabbing whatever Bernardino needs. And so these entities are coming out, and to watch Bernardino, he knows exactly how to work the energy with his hands, with his body positioning, with the salvia. So Chaps, have you heard of salvia? People smoke salvia, right?
Yeah.
So that is that plant, Salvia divinorum. It's in the sage family. It grows in this area of Oaxaca also. It's native. They call it pastora, which means the shepherdess. And so he uses those in ceremony, like a big bushel of it, fresh leaves for cleansing, right? Like cleansing your body. And Don, you may remember when he's like, fanning you with it and putting it over your heart and your face and wrapping it around your head and, using it for cleansing and that kind of thing. But so anyway, I'm just saying the way that he's able to, and then he opened the door and like escorted these entities outside. Like that takes serious power and experience.
Something I heard you say while we were down there, you were like, Mexico is America's shadow. What did you mean by that?
Oh, man. So we have very big problems in the United States in many ways. And we have this thing that I'm calling the American parasite, which is essentially what we inherited from the Roman Empire, which is this like conquering energy. We must get more, the biggest, the best, more of the biggest and the best. We got to own it. It never ends. And this is in every aspect of our life, going out to eat, buying a home, our careers, everything we do is infected by this conquering dominator spirit. And in Mexico, they're very humble, and their values, like we kind of talked about, are the family and the spirit, right? Like these people are far more intact with their religions or spiritual practices. People in America like show up to church on Sunday and then go fucking, do what they do. But these people are very like rooted in the spirit of the land, of their religions, of their families, and all of these values that the lack of is destroying our country and our people. That's why I'm calling it the shadow, because Mexico stands for everything that we're scared to look at within ourselves. The humbleness, the respect, the connection to yourself and to spirit and to the land. These are all things that we have largely as a culture abandoned. And so that's why I say that it is like the shadow of
okay.
And just like in terms of like the country as a whole too, right? Like, for example, like Mexico, they just did something amazing. They banned all corn imports from the US because it's all GMO. It's all genetically modified, and Mexico eats an enormous amount of corn. but they were getting 80% of their corn from the US, from Bill Gates's fucking, farms out west. And the president of Mexico banned 100 all GMOs in the country.
Bill Gates is a big corn guy.
Bill Gates owns more farmland than anybody else in America.
Yeah,
did not know
He's
that.
the largest landowner in America.
Bill Gates is trying to own all of the farms in the U.S.
I had zero idea.
Almost as much farmland as Rhode Island.
Jeez,
the shit ton. The two biggest private landowners in America are Bill Gates and China.
Yeah, and all of McDonald's French fries comes from Bill Gates's potatoes, and that's
one farm. All potatoes come from one farm in Idaho. It's a very particular type of potato
that can be used to make the McDonald's French fry.
It's the only farm, like the only farmers that make the potatoes for any McDonald's in the world.
It's crazy, and these are like the most fucking lab rat potato plants you could ever imagine. Like, just there's no fucking ecosystem in these places.
They got to be long enough to fit out the extra large container. That's the reason they're grown to be longer, so they stick out like the commercials.
Yes. I like my potatoes free range.
Yeah, free rooted. Yep.
All right, that's a lot to unpack. Obviously, so like Chaps was a former Marine too, so I don't know how he feels about the American parasite, but
I'm fine. I think to me the most American thing that you can do as an American is criticize the fuck out of your country. I think that is the basic tenet of being America. The Bill of Rights, the freedom of speech does not exist. It exists for the purpose of talking shit about your government, not to your neighbor, to your left or your right.
Mm-hmm.
Well said, Chaps. It's like, that's a huge problem with it, is that we're ignorant to the issue. Like, because our pride is too great, or like literally America. And by the way, I love our country. I'm in it right now. Like, I really have a lot of respect for the foundations of what the country is built on, but we can't be blind to the fact that darkness is controlling the country, but the American people are amazing people. Like, American people are amazing. And Arturo, he spends a lot of time in America too. He agrees. Like, the American people are good people. We're just confused. And we have big issues in our country, right? And we got to talk about it. And America really represents like the unexamined ego of the world.
Mm-hmm.
We're like a big toddler that when it doesn't get its way, just throws a tantrum and destroys anything in its way.
Yeah. So I know you have to leave kind of soon. So my last question is, you weren't always super into plant medicine. You weren't always a spiritual guy. You were telling me that you used to be a gym bro of sorts. And I was just curious, what prompted your journey down this path? If there was like one experience you had that you were like, this is the answer. This is what I want to devote my life to.
And why was it an interview with Aaron Rodgers on ayahuasca?
So I'm from this little tiny town, this little farm town in Ohio. And, everybody's ambitions were to like be a carpenter, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But I always felt so out of place, and I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was into. I didn't know what I wanted. I had never found anything that lit me up. Like, I went through high school, like, just like, I thought I was invisible. I was just like, what the fuck? Like, this has got to be some kind of sick joke. This is terrible. And so when I was like 16, going on 17, I was in shop class, like woodworking class, with this kid, Derek, who was winning these like state powerlifting championships, and he was fucking yoked to the gills. And he started telling me about all the steroids he was using. And I was like, I'm in.
Hell yeah.
It was just like, I'm in.
Sold.
This is it was just like, I was at a point in my life, I was just so lost. I was like failing classes. I didn't care about school. I was quitting sports. It was just like, I need something to give me an identity. That's what it was. And our school had this amazing weight room. So I would stay and lift with this dude for hours. And I was like very like skinny, like tall guy. And I was just lifting with this kid for hours. And then once or twice a week, he would hit me with a fucking harpoon, dude, filled with testosterone in my ass. Like I started using, 4 or 5 months into working out, I was using steroids. And it got so bad to where the only sport that I was sticking with at the time was track. I was high jumping. And I had to sit out pretty much my entire senior year of high jumping because my ass was so swollen from the shots he was giving me that I couldn't even walk. And so I went balls deep into this for 3 or 4 years straight. I did not cycle off. I took massive amounts of steroids, and I devoted my life to eating 6 meals a day. And I was training for 5 hours a day. I was doing bodybuilding competitions. I was a personal trainer, and I had wrapped up my whole identity in that. And then right before my 21st birthday, I had started smoking weed before, and I had smoked weed in high school, but then I came back to it and I started smoking before my workouts.
That's enjoyable.
Very.
It is. And, I was in such a bad relationship with the gym that, because cannabis, we don't look at it this way because it's more on it's the gentlest of the boundary dissolving plants, but it is a psychedelic. It does dissolve the boundary in a very subtle way. And when I say that, I mean like psychedelics, they dissolve boundaries. That's really what they do. Like when you're in the space on a huge dose of mushrooms or ayahuasca, it's not like all this stuff just appears. You're just now completely open. There's no more of this filtration system or resistance, right? You're just open to all of the energy within you and outside of you. And so cannabis is subtle in its boundary dissolution. So I was already starting to like ask questions. I was realizing I didn't have that same like anger that was like fueling my workouts. I was like, I was more chill. And that was like the start. And that's what opened me up to the possibility of what happened next. So this guy who I was very good friends with, he had left, he was going to Ohio State. He comes back, to town, and he introduces me. Well, actually, no, I went to Columbus to see him, and he introduced me to LSD. And so I was 20, and this was my first time with like psychedelics other than cannabis. And we took LSD at Ohio State campus, and I woke up the next day and never, ever thought about or touched steroids ever again, and never actually went back to the gym ever again.
Oh, shit.
Like I actually...
Good for you. It's just good for you.
Literally, guys, I literally was full blown on this path, took a small dose of LSD, and turned around and like went in a completely new direction from that experience. And then that summer, so this was in May, and then by June, July, August, I was taking mushrooms and like just really going like hard, really going deep, like trying to figure it all out. And I guess I've learned a lot, and I've grown a lot and handle things with different care these days, but I guess I've just kind of stayed on that path.
And then I guess like a few years afterwards, is that when you started to travel?
So so then that was the start. And then I, started traveling, and, I've had some really cool experiences. Mexico's my favorite place in the world, but, I'm most known for the elephant poop mushroom video in Thailand, where I ate cubensis psilocybin containing mushrooms from the poop of these elephants.
Dude,
and then
I was gonna ask about that. I didn't want to look like a fucking idiot. I wanted to ask about, because I had seen, because when you mentioned Africa, I watched a video on TikTok like the other day of that happening.
Maybe it was his video, but he did that in Thailand.
I know, but I was going to ask about it. I was just glad to hear about the elephant thing, because I had heard about it from a video that I seen in Africa.
Yeah.
And they were eating shrooms from
they've tried a bunch of different shit. Like they do that, and then but the main focus on the video, the mushroom aspect was just like a little add-in, but the main focus of it was coffee.
Oh, interesting.
Like that the coffee there, it's one of the most expensive coffees in the world. They give it to an elephant. The elephant eats all these coffee beans, and then they collect the shit.
Yeah.
And then they like kind of rinse it off, and then they make their coffee, and going through the elephant's digestive system takes all the bitterness out.
Yeah. I mean, in the US, a lot of shrooms will grow from cow poop.
Yeah. So Stropharia cubensis grows in the poop of any ungulate mammal. Water buffalo, rhino, cow, elephant, like all of these like multi-chambered stomach mammals, these mushrooms will grow in their poop. It's really amazing. And it's a huge elephant in the room of like ancient cultures. It's like, listen, everywhere in the world has always had access to mushrooms. And they were certainly eating them. What's very unique about where we were at, where I took Don, is that there's over 24 psilocybin-containing mushrooms that grow in this Sierra Mazateca region in the forest. No poop required. So this is one of the only places in the world like this, where there's this massive variety of psilocybin-containing mushrooms, different species, just popping up in the forest.
Yeah. So, I mean, even though that town we went to, like that's famous as the place to put shrooms on the map because they were using it in all their like religious rituals, but probably people had been having shroom experiences all over the world for thousands of years. It just wasn't as like ingrained into the local religion. So I guess we didn't know about it.
Well, and a lot of that was lost anyway. And this actually, if you ever read like Food of the Gods by Terence McKenna or heard about, the stoned ape theory, his idea, so like a couple 100,000 years ago, the human, or 50,000 years ago, the human brain size doubled in like 150,000 years. And like, scientists say like, it's the single biggest organ growth in a mammal ever observed. This is something that would normally take 10 million years. And there's this huge question of how did that happen? And people have put out all kinds of theories of cooking meat is the reason why, and then there's the elephant in the room, which is the mushrooms, which we know they create neurogenesis and create new neural pathways in the brain. Like they actually stimulate growth of new neural pathways in the brain. So it makes sense that, and so his argument is that when we were receding out of the trees, in like, this is hundreds of thousands of years ago, right? Like receding out of the trees as Africa was starting to warm, turning into desert, we were coming out of the trees, and naturally a species has to expand its diet. We were like in the canopy eating bugs and fruit and shit. And now we're on the ground and we need to expand our diet. And there's just massive amount of ungulate mammals, like these ancient cows, and so we're following them around, living off of like lion kills, of them. And then also imagine you're this like pre-human ape searching around for new food options. And then there's these big voluptuous mushrooms growing out of a brown little mound in the ground. You're going to eat it.
Yeah.
And so his argument,
I'd eat it.
That basically was a huge part of our evolution that we have forgotten. And so it just begs the question of like all of these cultures all around the world, like Hinduism, in the Vedas, they talk about soma, which all of Hinduism is based on the experiences produced by soma, but nobody knows what soma was. And I think a lot of people who get into this stuff are pretty set that soma is some sort of mushroom, which is why.
Yeah. Especially because in Hinduism, cows are holy.
Mhm.
Exactly.
And maybe they became holy because they were like, holy shit, if we eat the
Legit.
the mushrooms.
Shit, actually.
Yeah.
It's literally holy shit.
Holy shit. La caca sagrada. Sacred poop. Yeah. No, that's it, man.
Well, thanks for coming on. This was very enlightening. And if you're interested in doing ayahuasca with Jaret, he's leading a bunch of retreats to the Yucatan.
Yeah.
So just follow him. He's Soul of Jaret on Instagram,
On everything.
TikTok, and on YouTube.
Soul of Jaret, and my name is Jaret. So it's SOULOFJARET. If you just go to any of my YouTube videos or my Instagram bio, like it's all linked there. You can join us November, December, January, or February. Come drink ayahuasca, explore caves and cenotes, build shamanic drums, eat traditional meals. It's going to be amazing.
So your trip overall, what would you rate it? Was it everything that you hoped it would be? Is there stuff that you want to go back and try again?
I'm definitely glad I got to experience that and actually meet the great grandson of Maria Sabina. I think I'm going to try to just put out a mini documentary on kind of like the history of shrooms, and could maybe even like talk to people in the office for that too, about their own personal shroom experiences here. I needed a translator. I think when I went on this trip, I was like, all right, someone's going to have to speak pretty good Spanish. No one could really speak Spanish like on the entire trip. I could have used White Sox Dave.
Is he good at it?
He claims to be fluent. He is not fluent, but he is not fluent by any means. But I think his Spanish is at least better than mine. Another very cool experience, I think the video will already be out by the time this podcast comes out, is I got to go to my first Lucha Libre match.
Oh, shit. Now we're cooking. We're cooking.
That was awesome because I happened to be down there for Mexican Independence Day. So they had like a Lucha Libre match in honor of that.
One of my favorite movies, Nacho Libre.
That was all I really knew about Lucha Libre heading into it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I got to go.
Ramses is the best. He is the hero of the party. I love that movie.
In the movie, is he like a priest?
He's a monk, yeah.
I think that movie is loosely based on a true story.
I think so too.
Yeah, there was a story of like a priest who like started to wrestle to raise money to like help the less fortunate.
Yeah.
But Lucha Libre, I thought it was going to be in this big arena. It was almost like backyard wrestling. It was like in this converted basketball court in the back of some building, but it was electric. And there was like no rules. You can kind of just walk wherever you want. So I was like up against the ring. Some dude got tossed out of the ring over me, and then it just like goes flying into the chairs. And I had a translator for that, or at least I thought I did. My first day in Oaxaca, I did a live stream where I was just a walking tour of the city. And
I was in the chat for that for a while.
Okay. So you know who Mike is?
Yes.
Yeah. I ran into Mike. And the chat was like, you're going to get robbed. Like, don't trust this guy.
I love the dog.
The Mike and his little chihuahua. But I was like, you know what? It's fine. I'm just gonna, if I let this guy give me a tour, it'll make the stream so much better than me just wandering around on my own. And he gave me a great tour. He showed me where to get the best mezcal, showed me this cool market.
Gave you amazing mezcal advice.
Oh, yes. That clip is now one of the most like viral clips I've posted in years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I went viral on TikTok. It's at like 4.5 million views.
Yeah.
It's a clip of him just saying that like mezcal will cure all of your stomach problems. And like say if you have an ulcer or something like that, you just wake up first thing before you brush your teeth, do anything, you take a shot of mezcal just for 1 week. It will kill all the germs in your stomach and you'll be good to go.
I love mezcal too.
Mezcal is great.
Mezcal Paloma is my go-to cocktail at a lot of restaurants.
It went viral on TikTok. I have people from Nigeria, Lagos, the Philippines, all reaching out to me being like, what type of mezcal should I use?
Like you're the mezcal guy now?
Yeah. They're like, where do I find mezcal? And I'm like, dude, I don't even know if this works.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can't test it out because I don't have any serious stomach issues at the moment.
Danny Conrad.
Has he been complaining?
Big diarrhea guy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what was the Lucha Libre? What are they like?
Yeah. So then that Mike, after he gave me the tour, I was like, hey, can you be my translator at this Lucha Libre fight? I'll pay you money to translate for me. I'll buy your ticket. And he was on board And so I meet up with him. We go to the event, and at first I offered to buy him a beer. He was like, "No, I'm good. I don't need beer." And then like 5 minutes later, he was like, "Hey, can you pay me up front just so I can buy a beer?" And I felt that was kind of weird because I just offered to buy him a beer. But I was like, "Yeah, sure. He's here." I paid him the money up front, and then we're like about to go up and talk to the wrestlers. That was like the one time I needed him to translate. And then all of a sudden he's gone.
He's a ghost.
He's a ghost. He did message me back like an hour later. He was just like, "Oh, I had to move my bike, man, like whatever." And I was just like, okay, you know what? He gave me a great tour. I guess I'll consider that payment for the tour.
Yeah.
Cause I don't know what his deal was. He was not from Mexico. He was an American guy who went through a messy divorce 10 years ago and then just decided to move to Mexico.
What a legend.
Yeah. He was like, I can be broke in the US or I can
That's the beginning of a Netflix show.
Yeah. His words were, I can be broke here in the US or I can move to Mexico and be just all right. But it seemed like he was still pretty broke in Mexico. Cause like the first thing he told me when I met out with him, he was like, "I brought my dog to my landlord's house before I went to the wrestling match. And then my landlord was like, 'When are you going to pay me rent? What the fuck? You haven't paid rent in 3 months.'" That was probably a red flag. He may have had some drug problems. We don't know. So I just did the interviews. One of the wrestlers by the name of Holocaust helped me translate a bit because he could speak some English.
I don't know if that one flies in the WWE.
No, but I asked him, it's not related to the German Holocaust.
It's not.
No, it's not.
What is it related to?
He said it's like
What?
No, he said like Holocaust. It means, because I'm sure they're like.
But if you tell somebody your name and you say, "Oh, it's actually not representative of one of the world's largest tragedies,"
so
you got to switch it.
This is what he told me. So Holocaust, the actual word, it comes from ancient Greek and it means burnt offering. So he said it's about sacrifice. Like I'm an offering to God. I'm a sacrifice to God. And that's why he calls himself Holocausto. But and he was
still not a fan. Still got to switch it.
Yeah.
You got to find a new Instagram handle.
Hey, he didn't have any like swastikas on his mask or anything.
That's good.
I was not a big WWF fan growing up. I went to one event. It was cool, but I kind of grew out of that. I know a lot of Americans just don't grow out of that phase, like Brandon Walker.
Mm-hmm. Robbie Fox.
Were you a WWF guy?
I was more poor, so I was a WCW guy.
All right. Yep.
Yeah.
Then there was WWE, right?
Well, WWE and WWF are the same thing.
Oh, okay.
The World Wildlife Foundation sued World Wrestling Federation, and so then that's why they became Worldwide Entertainment.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I found it electric. I have a newfound appreciation for Lucha Libre and the WWF in general.
Yep.
They take the mask very seriously. I walked into the changing room with a camera. They were like, "Oh, wait, we're not wearing our masks."
Yeah. It's like you with your sunglasses.
Yes. Well, I don't always wear the shades anymore.
But you used to.
You
and PFT used to be real serious about it.
I know. That was I know PFT made the switch when we started doing live streams all the time. He was like, if I'm watching all these live streams wearing shades, like my eyesight's going to go to shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't wear them all the time anymore. It's nice to wear from time to time.
All right. Overall, Mexico, your trip.
The only reason I won't give it higher is that I didn't have time to like film more because we spent so much time in that town. But from the people I met, the food I ate, the landscapes I saw, it's definitely in the 8s, probably in 8.3.
Nice.
But I'll be back to Mexico. Like I want to go down for Day of the Dead. I want to check out Mexico City.
Well, if you're listening and you have any stories from Oaxaca, make sure that you send them over. We'd love to see them. We'll put them out on our socials and things like that. And give us some tips if the next spot that Donnie or I need to go to whenever we're in Mexico. Anything else you want to add about Mexico?
I think on like TikTok, everybody talks about this like mushroom mountain in Oaxaca, which is in this like San Jose del Pacifico. I didn't go there. That's probably the spot. If you're just trying to do shrooms recreational with friends, that's probably the spot to go to. If you want a more holistic experience where it's like focus on spirituality, focus on healing yourself, then Huatla de Jimenez and Bernardino would be your guy. But yeah, hit us up. We should figure out how to do voicemails where you can send in questions, because then in the future episodes, we can address questions you have about previous episodes.
Yep.
Cool.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for joining us.
Hasta luego.
Oh, yeah. Hasta luego.
Welcome back to Getting Cultured. Today, we're going to be taking some voicemails from the Pinheads. Shout out all the Pinheads.
Shout out the Pinheads.
Love the support we've been getting from this podcast so far. And yeah, I already have quite a few voicemails. We'll try to just answer 2 today.
Hey, big fan of the show. My question is, I was wondering which place that you guys have visited had the friendliest people and which place had the unfriendliest people. And then maybe bad experience you've had with those people. Have a good pod, boys.
So this one's kind of tough because most places I've been, the people have been very friendly.
Yeah, I think the second part of the question is harder. Like, who were the meanest?
Unfriendliest?
Yeah.
I'd say the least warm people I've encountered was in Russia. I was there in the middle of the winter. No one was mean to me. No one treated me like shit because I was American, but not a lot of smiles walking down the streets.
Yeah.
And I had a horrible fixer there. I had this Canadian journalist that was going to help show me around, and I arrived and I was like, I want a really authentic Russian meal. And he brought me to Hooters because he had a crush on one of the waitresses.
I mean, you got to expect that when you're in Russia, though.
He was not helpful at all. So yeah, I just felt really lonely there. Didn't make a lot of friends, but no one was mean to me. Friendly. I mean, a lot of people say the Philippines, and I'd agree with that. Really warm people. They are all the women call you sir. Like, hello, sir. What would you like, sir? Oh, okay, sir. That sounds wonderful, sir. Sir, how are you doing, sir? And it's nice. It's nice. So the Filipinos are very warm, friendly people. For a while, they had a president that was not a warm, friendly person. Duarte. And apparently, he was just like, if you bring a dead drug dealer into the police department, we'll pay you $100.
Yeah.
So then everyone was just going around killing people that...
Pretty lawless time.
Yeah, not necessarily were drug dealers, but Filipinos are friendly. And on my honeymoon, I went to Tahiti, French Polynesia. And me and my wife were on bikes, and her dress got caught in the bike real bad. It tore off half her dress. We couldn't get the bike working again. The sun had already gone down, so we're on the side of the street. It's pitch black, and the car right behind us pulls over, and he spends it was a man and his wife. They spent 25 minutes untangling her dress from the bike. And then they were hop in our car. We put the bikes in their car. They drove us to a restaurant. They could speak very little English, but he was using Google Translate. And he was like, we want to bring you to eat with our family. So we went to a restaurant, had a meal with their extended family. They wouldn't let us pay for the meal.
Damn.
Super friendly. And then dropped us and the bikes off back at our Airbnb. It was just super friendly, because for a while I was like, we are fucked. We're just going to have to ditch this bike.
That's awesome. For me, I would say most unfriendly. Again, it's hard, but I would say overall people that you encounter there on a daily basis, New York. I think New York, of all the places that I've been. Okay. I'm trying to go through foreign countries, and I know that's not probably the spirit of the question, but I feel like it's the most legit.
Well, here's the thing. You were shot in a foreign country in Iraq. That guy wasn't super friendly to you.
Yeah, but he's dead, so.
Okay. But that was in Iraq, right?
Yeah.
And then when I went to Iraq as a tourist, the locals were as friendly as could be.
I never had any issues with the locals when I was in Iraq. Besides the fighters. But the people that were in the villages that you dealt with on a day-to-day basis, so nice. Giving us food, making us bread, all kinds of shit. But my nicest would be the people from Red Deer, Alberta, Canada.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable. I stayed there for 6 weeks whenever I was in college. Stayed with the Hutterites, which is Canadian version of Mennonites or Amish, but they use more technology, super rich, huge landowners, but they have roots in several different countries. I think like a lot of Dutch, German influence. They speak like 4 or 5 languages, but anything that you wanted when you were on their place, like, well, you didn't want anything. The amount of food that they gave you, the amount of hospitality, they were just incredible. The Hutterites from Red Deer, Alberta, Canada.
Yeah, Canada gets ranked up there as one of the friendliest countries often.
Yeah, just in general. And, I mean, it's hard to be in a bad mood in Canada because they call their money loony and toonies.
Loonies and toonies?
Yeah, like a
right.
one is a loony and $2 is a toonie.
Ireland also gets ranked really high. I've had all positive experiences with the Irish. They also love Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Botswana, friendly. Yeah, it's kind of just more hard to think of places where they aren't friendly.
Yeah.
What's up, Donnie? What's up, Chaps? Not so much a question as it is a story. Donnie, I've been watching your stuff since I was a wee young lad, and it inspired me to go to China a couple times, handful of times. But my last stint over there was right before COVID, and I worked as a marketing manager for a nightclub. And pretty wild story. Me and a bunch of what would you call them? Classmates, I guess, yeah, from a little study abroad action. We got in a fight in a nightclub in Chengdu with a bunch of either Koreans or Japanese, probably Chinese nationals, but and then me and my buddy and a lot of my other classmates all had to go to the police station and do what they call having tea. So I guess to turn this into a question, have you ever had to sit down with the Chinese police and have tea to stay out of Chinese court, essentially? It's kind of like you broker a deal with the two afflicted parties, and you can avoid court that way, which is great for a foreigner in a communist country. But, yeah.
Well, first word of advice, I would definitely avoid getting into fights in China and foreign countries in general.
Yeah, good advice.
Because their court system is never going to take your side. Mm-hmm. Even if you were just randomly jumped, it was unprovoked completely, they're not going to side with the foreigner.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that happen to people. There was like a Ball State linebacker that moved to China and was coaching football out there, playing football, and he was a huge guy. And Chinese people had offered him drinks at a nightclub, and he was like, no. And they got really offended that he was turning down their drinks. That's a big insult in Chinese culture. And he got jumped leaving the club, and he just was defending himself and hurt one of the Chinese guys who had to get surgery on his eye or something. And he was in jail for, I think, a year and a half.
Yeah.
Even though they had footage of him being jumped, nobody took his side, and it was very tough for him to get out. Thankfully, the only fight I got into in China, I lost badly.
Yeah.
And so I was not going to court. I had already been dealt with. Yeah, I saw this other American dude was being bullied by a bunch of people at a nightclub, rightfully so. I didn't know why he was being bullied, but they were like, fuck foreigners. And then I responded, no, fuck you guys. and then the bouncers were holding back these 5 Chinese people. And then they all turned to me. The bouncers let them go. And I blocked one punch, the other one directly in the eye. Couldn't open my eye for a while. And this is when I was teaching kindergarten. I had to wear my Donnie shades into kindergarten. And I think it was Christmas. So I was dressed up as Santa Claus in dark shades.
Santa with the boozing problem.
Yes, exactly. And they were like, can you please take off the shades? You're kind of scaring the kids. And I was like, oh, you want me to really scare the kids? And I showed them my eye. And they're like, keep those on.
Yeah.
Keep those on. But yes, I've had to sit down with Chinese police multiple times. The first was dancing on the court at a Shanghai Sharks game. And I had tea with the cops, explain that I didn't know it was a rule that you couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm. And what do you mean?
Yeah. And so they checked my visa, let me go. Another time, I snuck into a Rolling Stone concert out there with a fake press pass. And not only did I get in with a fake press pass, I then used that press pass to get backstage. And at one point I was underneath the stage while they were performing.
Yeah.
And I had a briefcase that had my cameras in it. And I got caught and they thought I was a terrorist. They thought I was trying to like plant a bomb or something.
Shit.
And they handed me over to their American head of security, the guy who like travels with the Rolling Stones around the world. And he was terrifying. Shoved me against the wall, searched me. He was like, "You are so fucked, buddy. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hand you over to the Chinese police." And then I was like, "Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
I'll be able to talk my way out of this." And then the Chinese police brought me to the police department. They couldn't speak English, but they were like, "Write a note of what you did wrong." And so I was just like, "The Rolling Stones were my favorite band, but I didn't have a ticket, so I made a fake press pass. I'm so sorry. I will never do it again." And once again, they checked my passport, saw that I was in the country legally, and had a friend come and pick me up and was not in trouble. And then the third time...
Pretty light.
Very light. Especially like their American guy was like, "Dude, you are so fucked." He was like, "Do you know what this looks like? It looks like you're a terrorist." He was pissed. He did confiscate my cameras. And I think I was on a little bit of shrooms at the time. So it was, it was a scary experience, but I got off scot-free. And the third time, I was filming a prank for this prank show we used to do called Monkey Kings. And the prank was us just dressed as Secret Service agents. And like we would find a random Chinese person on the street and follow them around and act like we were their personal security. And then we would just film their reactions. They'd be like, "This is so weird." At one point, unbeknownst to us, we were filming in front of a Chinese SWAT van. And so then a paddy wagon pulled up and they're like, "You need to come with us." Threw us in the back, brought us to the police department. They're like, "What are you guys doing?" Like filming a Chinese SWAT van. They kind of thought we were...
Case in the joint.
Yeah, they thought we were actually secret agents or something like that, or American intelligence.
And you, with like how you look, 6'1", white guy, good build, sunglasses. I can see that.
Yeah, and that was the whole point of the prank. Like we were trying to look like Secret Service agents. So maybe not a good idea to film that prank in China. But once again, we like just explain that we're filming a prank show. And what they really care about is that you're in the country legally, which we were. And that time it took a lot longer. We had to, I think my friend was a teacher out in China and he had to like call his employer. They had to talk to his employer. But eventually we got out scot-free once again.
Yeah, I think that's what you said at the beginning of the assumption is that the American's in the wrong or that the foreigner is in the wrong. That happened in Japan too. And in Japan, if you wronged a Japanese person, like if, let's say you're driving down the road and they T-bone you, you're at fault. The American is at fault. Like, and they tell you that like the moment that you get there, they sit all the Marines down and they're like, everything that happens here, if it happens with a Japanese citizen, you are at fault no matter what. So you just got to be extra careful. And then they even have like a system set up. It's called gomenasai payments. And gomenasai just means I'm sorry in Japanese. And so if you do something to them, there's like a fee schedule where you could pay them where they won't take you to jail.
I don't know if they have something like that in China. It's kind. Is it like a bribe or no? It's
sort of like
it's an official
bribe
payment?
adjacent.
Yeah. In a lot of countries, they will accept bribes, especially in a place like Colombia, where cops are like just trying to arrest foreigners because they know they can get a bribe. They don't actually want to throw you in jail. They want to scare the shit out of you and be like, you could go to jail for 10 years or you could pay me $500 right now. Mm-hmm. But in China, just never fight a Chinese person. I don't care what the situation is. It's never going to work out well.
That's a good spot to end this segment.
Definitely. And yeah. And hey,
it got real deep and heavy there.
I'm sure.
Not fight. Look it right in the camera.
Do not
fight a Chinese person.
Never.
Ever. Under any circumstances.
Well, yeah. I'm not going to try to think of a, but you know what?
Yeah, don't try to come up with reasons.
Yes, I won't.
Yeah.
I probably have a few more stories related to my interactions with Chinese police, but we'll save those for another episode.